Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to session A103, getting the best results out of HEVC encoding. What we want to do in this panel is to give you practical answers about how you encode and deliver HEVC video today. I think that last year at Streaming Media, if you would ask people about HEVC, they would say, yeah, we're using it. I mean, those service providers who are delivering to 4K TVs, who want to do over-the-top 4K with HDR, obviously HEVC was the right choice. For any other application, the debate on next-generation codec was still open. But I think now, this year, there have been major changes. In April, Samsung announced that the Galaxy S7 and S8 support HEVC decoding, and also their high-end tablets. In June at WWDC, Apple announced support for HEVC in iOS 11, which has since been released, and macOS High Sierra. Also, on the Windows platform, if you're running the Edge browser and your Intel chip inside has Skylake or Kaby Lake with HEVC decode capabilities, you already have HEVC support on your Windows computer as well. So I believe that by the end of this year, we'll see hundreds of millions of devices that are already HEVC capable, including the ability to decode HEVC in software. So the question now is not regarding HEVC. It's not if or when. Now the question needs to be how. How do we encode HEVC? And that's why we've gathered here today a panel of experts from all across the industry who will give you some practical tips. Some of them have already deployed HEVC in the field. And we'll talk about issues such as the HEVC deployment strategies, the workflows, the manifests, encoding techniques, and streaming protocols. And we hope to share with you the lessons learned building actual HEVC deployments and how to obtain the highest performance and quality using hardware or software solutions. So I think we'll start by introducing the panel. I'll give you an example. My name is Dror Gill. I'm the CTO and VP product at Beamr. And Beamr is a leading provider of video encoding and optimization solutions for MSOs, telcos, and OTT service providers. Daniel.
Hello. Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Sanders from Verizon Digital Media. People think of phone service when they think of Verizon, but we operate massive scale streaming platforms on behalf of major broadcasters and media companies, providing CDN services, ad insertion, and so on and so forth.
Hi, my name is Samir Ahmed. I'm Chief Architect and VP Technology at Fandango. Fandango, obviously, you know, is a ticketing company, but we also run the FandangoNow business, where we deliver high quality videos, video on demand, including UHD, HDR, high definition, standard definition.
Good afternoon, I'm David Hoff with Intel. I'm in the DataCenter group, and as Dror mentioned, we're obviously involved in the PC and the Mac side of decoding videos. You get that in your home device, your mobile device, but in the data center, we've been quite involved with our Xeon processors as well as what we call Intel QuickSync for really efficient encoding. So we'll be talking about that some more. Thank you.
And I'm Theron Trowbridge from Deluxe. And Deluxe is the Hollywood post-production facility, but the part that I'm focused on is the sort of end-to-end support of streaming from streaming services, from acquisition of content and encoding to whatever codec is needed, hosted on CDN and full management.
Okay, thank you very much. So let me start a bit about the when of HEVC. I read a developer survey that Bitmovin published last month, and according to that survey, 28% of video developers are already using HEVC, while 40% plan to use it in the next 12 months. And by the way, this compares to 18% that plan to use VP9, and only 14% that plan to use AV1. So my question to the panel would be, are you already doing it? Are you already streaming HEVC content to your users or preparing HEVC content for your customers? And what is your strategy for support of HEVC moving forward? how much do you think of your content will be available in HEVC, let's say, in the next 12 to 18 months? Daniel, do you want to start?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, we're doing through our uplink and Edgecast platforms, we're doing a lot of live streaming for some of the major broadcasters in the country. As such, they have to target every single device that's out there, and every single device that's out there supports AVC today. So the rush into providing HEVC has not, despite Apple's momentous announcements recently, there's not a sense that we have to have it now, but there's definitely a sense. To answer it shortly, yes, 100% we have to have it within the next 12 months or 18 months, but it's not immediate because we still have devices out there that can do what we've been doing in the past. So you won't see HEVC coming out of our platform today, but you will within the next 12 months.
So next year we'll see HEVC coming out
yeah.
of the VDMS platform.
Yeah.
Samir?
Yeah, we've been encoding most of our UHD videos since the end of 2015 in HEVC. We have multiple ABR, obviously, with different 6 layers, basically. And HEVC was able to kind of, really make this possible. Using, H.264 or AVC wouldn't have made it possible, so that's why we moved to HEVC. I think along the way, it's become much easier. At the very beginning, it was very difficult, it wasn't cost effective, very expensive, very time consuming to get it done. And since then, it's become a lot more commodity, a lot more of the tools now built in. The DRM is now all tied together, and now widely supported by Google and Apple, obviously. What we've decided to do is have all of our UHD, HDR videos, obviously, all in HEVC. We've just started now, actually, creating 2 separate packages, one in H.264 and one in HEVC for our HD content. And then hopefully over time, as more and more devices we can move over to HEVC streams, we'll delete the AVC streams.
Mm-hmm. And I think, David, one of the things that is enabling easier production of HEVC, because Samir talked about the fact that like 2 years ago it was a nightmare to go and encode a single title. So one of the things that is enabling it is the Intel support in hardware for HEVC and your commitment to this standard.
Yeah, I think we've seen a really big leap, particularly in the last 6 months. Obviously, the Apple announcement, spurred some things on. But for us, part of it is enabling our software ecosystem, partners like Beamr. We launched a brand new line of processors this summer we call the Xeon Scalable Processor Family. Goes up to 28 cores. Out of the box, HEVC didn't necessarily take advantage of all of that, but Beamr, for example, with their software, have really optimized and scaled to that. And so while people were starting to see the bitrate savings, it was still expensive to do the encode. It's a pretty heavy lifting compute task, and that's what really has changed. I would say by really leaps. Now people are really able to bring the total cost of doing that encode down quite a bit with the new processors, with the new optimized encoders. And we see the same thing with our fixed function encoders that are closer to the edge for the low latency. So I do think that performance aspect has really gone up, and so the price, that sort of hurdle that you're talking about, I think is coming down at just the right time now. So quite a big change.
Okay. Theron, I assume obviously all the Blu-ray production UHD is done in HEVC, but what is happening on the streaming front?
On the streaming front, we've been delivering HEVC streams for the last 18, 24 months to a small number of customers. It's a relatively small percentage of the content that we're processing, but we expect that to expand tremendously. People seem to conflate sort of UHD with HEVC because there's an obvious synergy there. But so as we get more and more interest in delivering 4K content out to the end user, we're going to see more and more HEVC.
Mm-hmm. And I think some of you have mentioned that there have been some technical hurdles when you go to streaming in new format, and it's not that mature in terms of the whole ecosystem. The standard is there. It has been closed and sealed for like 4 or 5 years. But how do you stream it? Do you use Dash? Do you use HLS? How do you combine manifests that need to have, let's say, the highest layer of UHD in HEVC and all of the lower ABI layers in H.264? Can you combine them together or not? And for example, DRM mechanisms, do they work the same for H.264 and HEVC, and how do you manage that? So if you want to talk a bit about the technical issues, Samir, because you mentioned having a dual solution, HEVC and H.264, in streaming to your customers.
Yeah, we've created, so a couple of different things, I think. We focused on UHD, HDR. We've created a single match. We were doing all our UHD, HDR in Dash, multiple DRMs, obviously, with common encryption. And we've basically created one manifest. And we have both UHD, HDR and UHD, SDR, which actually is two different manifest files. And inside that file, we create both our UHD layers, and then we actually continue in the manifest with our HD and SD layers as well. So
in H.264.
In H.264, exactly. And it's able to, on most devices, it's able to bounce around. For some other devices that don't support HEVC, we have a single, another file in just H.264 for UHD layers as well. But that's much, much bigger.
I see. Daniel?
Yeah, and I think, now you're speaking my language.
Yeah, getting down to the nitty-gritty, right, of the bits and the protocols and the three-letter acronyms.
Yeah, what we do at VDMS, we're not codec developers. We utilize best-in-class companies, and we invest in some of them as well.
Yeah. Full disclosure, Verizon Ventures is an investor. That's in Beamr, that's right.
So, I spend a lot of my time on the platform architecture that goes around incorporating HEVC into the workflow. And as you mentioned, there's so many considerations. What's the device range you're trying to target? What are the economics, the cloud, not just what we pay a codec company, but what are the cloud economics? What's the density that we're getting out of certain solutions? We're doing things at very high scale. When we do a major sports event, we have over 1 million concurrent viewers. We're stitching in individualized server-side ads. So we get into a whole area there of how are we going to encode the ads, how are we going to integrate them into the streams in a smooth way. Covering all the devices, as we just mentioned, is important. But I think the core thing I would try to drill in on here is that once you create too much fragmentation in your workflow, whether you're a service operator or whether you're a provider like us, you're making things harder. So you have to always think about condensing things to the most common set of of variables. And when you operate a big platform like all of us do, whether it's high scale out to users or it's just B2B and you're delivering a lot of files out to studios, you have to try and keep things as simple as possible for yourself, for the customers. And that's definitely one of the factors when we look at how we're going to design this stuff, because we don't want to have 10 different manifests for every device and it's just going to make things complicated. And, avoiding variation basically is a huge, huge thing. And as a new thing like HEVC comes into the mix, that's the core concern. Yeah, and putting things into a single manifest. We're doing DRM as well. So far, I don't feel like the introduction of HEVC throws too many monkey wrenches into the works with regard to DRM, and Dash specifies ways to switch codecs properly. So, but I spend a lot of time on trying to get to the most sensible workflows through the system and still providing device coverage, still being able to scale your platform up very high, still making sure, you've got to make sure that if you use a certain cloud provider like a lot of us do, that they have the right instance types that you want available in the regions at the scale that you want. So, yeah, a lot of concerns around just keeping it all together.
I can see what you mean. I mean, we develop codecs, we develop software. We don't provide the service to actually deliver it to our end users. Yeah. But what we did do just before IBC this year, and in preparation for the launch of iOS 11 as general availability, we launched a demo on our website at beamr.com that enables you to go to our website with an iOS 11 device or with a Samsung device or even with a TV and to view HEVC content. And we found it really to be a challenge. What packaging protocol should we use? How should we do delivery? we ended up actually doing progressive download of the file to the television and to Samsung, and to the iOS, we had to use, they support HEVC, of course, in fragmented MP4 inside HLS. Mm-hmm. So we didn't have the tools to prepare that, but we used an open source tool for doing, taking the file and making it into a fragmented MP4 for Dash. Mm-hmm. And then it turned out that we could write a quite simple Python script that took that Dash manifest and converted it into an HLS manifest. So using these simple tools, we were able to stream on our website to the iOS devices as soon as they became available. And I think this taught us a lot about the state of the industry, still a bit in flux regarding the protocols. Yeah. Theron, did you have any experience doing dual delivery of HEVC and H.264?
We have customers that are asking for that now, mostly I think for multiple device support. But one thing that we've found that's kind of amusing is even though the spec has been standardized for several years, there's HEVC and there's HEVC. Mm-hmm. And we're finding that we have to maintain multiple encoders just to be able to get targets for the different playback devices.
At the bitstream level, the HEVC bitstream.
At the bitstream level. And then the packaging on top of that becomes a challenge where we're creating multiple packages in order to target different playback even within the same bitstream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think this will probably go away in time as the industry becomes more mature. You want to comment?
I was just going to say, following up on your comment about the complexity of actually delivering it out to the end user, which Theron also mentioned. When I mentioned the economics of it all, it's not, there's how much it's going to cost you, but if you're operating a platform, any kind, whatever you're doing, if you're a game streaming platform or you're delivering big sports events like us, how are you going to price it? How are you going to make it make sense to the customer that's going to get this stuff delivered to their users? It's not always that straightforward to work out what it's going to cost you to create these arrays and what's the right price point for this stuff. It's another.
So I guess for VDMS as a platform and service company, and also for Deluxe as a company providing encoding and delivery services to your customers, the transition to HEVC will depend a lot on the pull you get from your customers. When do they want to do it? And
Very
also,
much so.
Why are they doing it? And the interesting question for me is when you move to this new codec, obviously HEVC is more efficient. You could get the same quality at 30, 40, 50% less bitrate. But if you look at it another way, you can stay with your current bit rates, whatever they are, and use HEVC at those bit rates, the same bit rates you used H.264, and then you get better quality. So what do you think, or have you gotten any feedback from your customers on whether they plan to use HEVC for bitrate reduction or for quality enhancement? And I think, Samir, for you, it's a more direct question because you have the actual connection to the end users. So you can make a comment from your side and how you see this trade-off.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of both. I think the difficulty has been, from the direct consumer standpoint, has been the device support, right? And just the continued device support. It's not just that the new devices support HEVC. It's that we also have a backlog of devices from 2014, 2015, even some of the 2016 devices that only support H.264. And so even though the HEVC touts 40, 50% improvements, we still have to duplicate the number of encodes we have to create, which is both on a production standpoint of encoding those, storage of those, and then delivery of those as well. And so until we're able really effectively to transition over and not create duplicate packages, it becomes a burden for any company to kind of see the effectiveness for HEVC. And so on our side, that's why we started with UHD HDR, obviously, as we're able to stream what's best for the consumer. I mean, going above that, you're going into kind of like a no man's world.
Right.
Can the consumer actually receive more than 15,
megabits
20,
per second,
25 megabits per second? I mean, sustained. I think that's the difficulty right there, and I think that's why we kind of went directly with HEVC. If not, you would be in the 35, 40, 50 megabit.
Yeah,
and
with
it's probably,
H.264.
yeah.
Yeah,
You know, we've seen sort of both sides just in terms of people asking us. Interesting, Dan, I think you mentioned it. One of the areas we're seeing HEVC come in is in game streaming, right? So we've got a lot of customers that are starting to host games, you know, in the cloud, in their data center for comm service providers, particularly aimed at regions that have high-speed, low-latency networks to their home. And we've definitely heard today they're sort of compromising quality, and one of their desires is if they could basically raise that quality up just by going to HEVC, obviously taking advantage of things like HDR as well. But we're definitely seeing both sides, you know, coming in. Certainly the ability to reduce cost of the bandwidth reduction is great.
Right.
But that's an interesting knob to be able to turn on the quality side.
But I think Samir really elaborated on the point I was trying to make, that as you move into the brave new world, you're still dragging the past with you.
Right. It's not like you jump to another world and all the past is left
Unless
behind.
maybe if you're launching a new service and you control the client and you distribute the client and that's it. But if we're doing broader things, then it gets more complicated.
We heard that people still need to support Windows Media, video, and stuff like that we thought was gone in the dinosaur ages, but it's still here and it's still with us. And legacy, you know, it's very important, especially when you have a very large user base, different types of devices.
And we're finding a kind of a combination of those things as well, in that since the bandwidth available to users both on mobile devices and into the home keeps increasing on average, we're seeing let's do the HDR 4K at a higher bit rate and not worry about so much about fallback bit rates, because we can assume that the customer is going to be able to receive high bit rate streams, but then we can overall reduce the number of overall bit rates. So instead of trying to deliver 6 or 7 streams, let's maybe go to 4, and we're seeing our bit rate reduction that way, so we save on storage and bandwidth, but still take advantage of the increased quality possible with the higher bit rates.
So you remain with your existing ABI recipe, but now the HEVC layer gives you a whole new level of experience. Right?
Yeah.
And I assume that part of this new level of experience is related to HDR. Because, I mean, it's obvious that HDR is tied in with HEVC. Nobody is delivering in HDR with AVC today. So for HDR delivery, I think that's the place where HEVC encoding started to happen. But there's another issue related to HDR, because once we've closed the debate on the codec, and we know how we're going to deliver with HEVC, what type of HDR are we going to use, right? There's HDR10, there's Dolby Vision, there is HLG, HDR10 Plus coming up. So Theron, I guess you probably have the most insight into this as being really in the production and facilities for enabling these new experiences.
Yeah, handling HEVC and even HEVC with HDR for the most part is relatively straightforward. That's not a huge challenge, especially with HDR10. It's pretty straightforward. That seems to be getting the most traction in the industry. Dolby Vision adds a whole nother layer to that, which has tremendous results, but it makes it much more difficult to deal with. Just more challenging, not difficult. It's just there's the extra things to think about. But so the encoding piece becomes easy. It's the content management becomes difficult, and you have to worry about what color space is this? Where's my white point? And what transfer function was used? So you have to know a lot more about the content that's coming in and how to handle it properly, so you don't make it suddenly it's all red. And the end user ends up seeing something that wasn't intended in the first place. So it's much easier to screw things up with HDR than it is with any other combination.
Right. And you really need to view the video in a new way. You need to QA it. I know that in our company, we have developing codecs for many years, but now HDR comes in, and we need to buy a brand new TV set that supports HDR, and that's only HDR10. And then Dolby Vision comes in, we need another TV set. And this year, HLG from out of nowhere came, and it seems that it's capturing a lot of attention, at least, because of its backward compatibility with SDR. So then we had to buy the new LG OLEDs, 2017 models, because they're the only one that support HLG, HDR10, and Dolby Vision at the same time. So we try to keep up. Personally, I'm not replacing my TV in my home until things settle down. But in the office, we have no choice, so we keep upgrading.
And by the time things settle down, we'll be talking about 8K.
8K, yeah, okay. But I think that will take a bit more time. With 8K, you need even larger screens. We, as a codec company, we have started to tackle the 8K issue. Initially, we didn't believe it was possible to do it in software, but once the new Intel chips came out with the scalable processors and 28 cores on each socket for a total of 56 physical cores, and we optimized our software and we managed to reach 6 channels of 4K P60 on a single server, thank you to Intel. Then we started looking at the 8K content, and it turned out that in software we can do 2 channels of 8K on this platform. And that is really amazing. Right now, I see the demand for 8K mostly in Japan, in Korea, in the most high-end advanced markets. But you're right, once we finish with one level of experience, you know, our industry has to make money, so we need to jump to the next level and get all the customers excited about it. But talking about HDR, has any of you seen demand to stream the HDR to the mobile devices? Because now Samsung has HDR-capable devices. The newest iPhone is HDR-capable, and the tablets as well. Have you seen any requirements for that? Do you see it in the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, definitely. I think on the Fandango side, we're working with multiple manufacturers and content partners to put this in place. We have multiple tests already running with these partners. Some of it's not just UHD anymore, but it is actually taking HDR to HD streams as well. And I think that's there's a new aspect there as well to look at. So.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's the thing for us, at least. It's not it's one of the things that our customers are shouting about, but it's not the loudest one that they're shouting about. But one point you did remind me of with regards to HDR in general, and it's just that. Again, when you're looking at I won't name any brand names, but certain encoders make it easier, certain make it harder, certain make you do more of the work yourself. So I think that's another important thing to evaluate. It's not just about getting that 720p image up there looking good. There's all sorts of other considerations also around audio. So there I'd call orthogonal concerns that you have to pay attention to when you're choosing your HEVC encoding path. I know we've talked about this in the past with regards to certain GPU solutions versus CPU-based ones.
Right.
So I just wanted to note that point. But yeah, I think the demand will just grow. The tablets are out there, and the things that people are shouting at us the loudest about are the pure picture quality, whether it's HDR or not, and time behind live latency is a very big issue for us. So. How quickly can you encode the right layers that I want to put into a manifest and have them at the right bit rates, resolutions, frames per second? That's what counts to me the most at the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
And this also affects the density that you can encode, because if you have high density and you can pack all of your ABL layers in a single server, that's great, because you can have one mezzanine stream coming in and then do all of your encodes. If not, you need to split it, you need to synchronize it, you need to synchronize the iframes on the ABR layers. It becomes more complicated.
And I'm going to get a different, potentially very different cloud bill at the end of the month based upon what I chose, and then I have to ask myself, do I charge the customers differently for that stuff? So,
Right.
So there's a lot of sort of tangential concerns too.
Okay, I think it might be a good time to open it up to some questions from the audience. So anybody wants to ask something about HEVC encoding, delivery?
Not all at once, please.
How many in the audience are doing any HEVC encoding or delivery today? Raise your hands. Oh, we have a few. We have quite a few. Okay.
What are the challenges when you're looking at content, when you bring content in and you're needing to transcode it, deliver it to a lot of different platforms? The issue with taking an HDR title, master and using that to produce SDR content for certain platforms, is there issues with how you do that color mapping?
Okay, so the question was about when you are streaming content in HDR and in SDR, and the mezzanine file comes in as HDR, high quality in a certain color space, and then you need to convert it because some of your layers are non-HDR. How does this work in terms of preparing the content?
Yeah, there's a lot of issues related to that, and to an extent that most content producers have kind of, be very aware of that, and actually now we're actually providing two mezzanine files, one SDR, one HDR. So we no longer actually have to convert the HDR to SDR, which we were doing at the very beginning. It was very time consuming from a quality control aspect. We actually had to put eyes on every single file. The studio actually wanted to review those files. And so since then, they've kind of, I think the business has matured a lot, where we just get two separate mezzanine files now, and it makes the encoding process a lot easier as they split. We don't have to put as many eyes on it anymore.
Mm-hmm. Theron, what about your experience in this field?
One of the advantages of Dolby Vision, of course, which helps justify some of the extra complexity, is that it's got the SDR baked into it. So you can sort of render out an SDR that's correct as far as the content provider is concerned. But if you ask a creative, they're two separate products, and that you really can't do those conversions properly. And so that's why we also see we'll get an SDR and an HDR version.
Mm-hmm. So you need the SDR master, so people don't have to deal with the conversion
because it's graded differently. They're typically in a different color space.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you seeing any demand for HLG from your customers?
Some, but not. We haven't gotten any request for that yet in a sort of a hard fashion. People are just inquiring.
Whether you will support it and what's your roadmap?
Right, and of course we'll support it. It's just a question of if there's enough of a demand for it in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions over there? Yes?
Can you comment on how the patent licensing situation of HEVC has affected your use of it?
Okay, so the question was regarding the patent licensing situation, and does it affect in any way your use of HEVC today?
Yeah, I think no, because we're already paying patent royalties already. So it doesn't increase the amount of royalties we're already paying. I think it's just a continuation of that approach. Obviously, we'd love to have it royalty free, but that's not the case. But even AVC has its own MPEG-LA royalties that we have to pay anyway. So it's not like it's a new. It's not like it's a brand new cost that nobody's ever paid before. It's actually just a continuation of royalty-related codecs.
I'd agree with that, but I'd say that it wouldn't hurt to have some more levels of clarification and consolidation on that whole situation. We're still using it though, but I think looking to see things get clearer as far as, it's still confusing to explain to somebody who's using your service. They want to know, am I going to own something? Because I read that if you're on the client side, if you're providing the client side, then you owe something. So additional clarification would behoove.
I completely agree with you. Yeah. In previous standards, there was a single standards body that took care of all the royalty licensing. And with HEVC, we're seeing 2 or maybe 3. The situation, I think, is getting better. Last week, HEVC Advanced announced that they are lowering the royalties for some type of low-end devices because they also want to see HEVC capturing a larger market share than it did before, and they are aware that the uncertainties regarding the royalties were really stopping the development of the market. But now that companies like Apple and Samsung have said, we're taking care of the device side, and that is enabled, and the chips are there from the mobile side and also on the encoding side. I think these issues are starting to be resolved, but I agree with you that if it was more clear to the end user, if there was some consortium saying, okay,
Yeah.
this is what's happening now with the HEVC royalties. This is what you have to pay if you are a service provider, if you are an operating system vendor or a browser.
Yeah.
Right now, what happens is that every vendor has to go into the websites and Pegele, HEVC Advanced, start looking at royalty schemes and combining them together because they're not always compatible. But I think that next year we will see less and less concern about this. Of course, everybody wants it to be royalty-free, right? On the other hand, every company that was involved in the development of the HEVC standard would like to get some return on their investment and the fact that they sent people around the world to the MPEG committees to sit and develop these specs and also develop the algorithms and patents that they contributed. So it's kind of a balance. But I agree that this situation could have been handled better, but it is getting better. I think that is the good news. David, do you have any considerations on this?
No, I mean, from Intel's perspective, yeah, it really doesn't affect us directly. So.
Yeah. Okay.
But we're still talking about it, so obviously it's still it's a thing.
Yeah,
still,
yeah.
we need to get to where it's not a thing.
Right.
But,
Other questions? Yes.
So every vendor talks about content-aware encoding, and at one level, there is content-aware capacity. But there's now more talk about, could the panelists talk about if they're doing anything in that area, and if so, what, and how they see it work?
Okay, so the question was about this issue of content-aware encoding, or sometimes this is called content-adaptive encoding, that seems to be getting more traction, and whether any of you have anything to say about things you are doing in this space. Obviously, Beamr has been doing content-adaptive for the past 5 years, but we'd like to hear about your experience with this type of technology.
I mean, I can say quickly that we do have some stuff, but I would categorize it as, I was going to say R&D, but it's not. It's used in a lot of our VOD content, but a big chunk of our business is live and linear, and we're not using it there. So it's basically, our effort is basically to take that stuff, roll it into our live and linear workflows, and not affect latency, which is a big challenge right now. I know Beamr has something good. We have other things that I don't know if we're quite there yet. But if you look at our live and linear streams that we're providing out for big sports companies, they're not using content adaptive today, but we're just following all the innovations, developing something in-house, looking at external companies and trying to get there.
Yeah, I think very similar. I think obviously, we've been working with Beamr in the past, where we've optimized the bit rate and the layers, very efficiently. In addition to that, we have built in some kind of like profiles for encoding, for animation versus grain versus kind of like heavy CGI that we run, kind of like optimize the kind of like the pre-processing side of the MES files to optimize the encoding behind it.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else wants to comment on content adaptive?
Yeah, obviously this is an area that Deluxe and our customers are very interested in, just because of the bitrate savings that are possible without sacrificing quality. And so we're looking at the solutions that are out there and things like Beamr, because it's something that could make a huge difference to somebody with a relatively low internet connection.
Mm-hmm.
And for file-based, it's going to be much easier than for a stream that's coming into the system. So the things that we've done and that we have in production are more VOD-centric. Like if you go and watch videos on Yahoo, which Verizon recently acquired, those are using content-adaptive encoding. But if you look at live streams out of our uplink platform today, they're not.
Mm-hmm.
Part of our approach is actually, I think, very similar to Beamr's. We develop sort of SDKs, if you will, that we provide to our software ecosystems. And a lot of what we focus on is giving customization, really allowing our partners to differentiate. And Beamr has really done a good job with that. They, in turn, really do a lot of unique things. So we don't offer a black box. They can get inside and put in a lot of that customization. And by the same token, you give that same flexibility to your customers. And so I think that really works well.
Thank you. We've actually done for the past few years the content adaptive encoding, which reduces bitrate. And this ties into the issue of HEVC, because our mantra has always been, instead of waiting for HEVC to happen, you can take H.264 and reduce the bit rates by 20, 30, 40% to the level that you would have reached with HEVC, but you remain in the domain of H.264. And that worked pretty well for our customers. But the question we always got was, yeah, but HEVC is coming, and then we don't need optimization technology or content adaptive encoding because HEVC can reduce the bit rate by 30 to 40%. Well, that is right, it can, but the nice thing is that HEVC does not have inherently any content adaptive features inside the encoder. So it does this reduction of 30 to 40% using mathematical means, formulas, better compression, better search, different sizes of blocks, but it doesn't have the perceptual element. And that's why we were able, even after HEVC was released, to reduce the HEVC streams, again, by 30, 40% using perceptual methods, because this is orthogonal to the actual encoding of the video itself. So now we're very happy that HEVC is out there, and everybody is aware of the need to reduce bit rates further. And also, as you mentioned, content adaptive, everybody's now talking about it in the industry, and we think it's a very good thing. So we have time for one more question.
Could I comment on that? I mean, to be frank, HEVC does not define any encoding, only defines encoding.
Yes, as any video standard.
It's free to choose whatever they want. So you have perceptual optimizations, other encoders may or may not. You cannot say HEVC encoding doesn't have it because it doesn't define encoding. It only defines the output of the encoder being encoded.
You are right. Any video codec, and this has been the case from MPEG-1, MPEG-2, MPEG-4, H.264, etc., only defines the syntax of the bit stream at the output and the tools you can use for encoding, like the frequency domain, motion estimation, and all of that. It doesn't define anything standard for the perceptual, and that's where other companies can innovate outside of the standard by using specific encoding techniques or pre-processing, etc. So I agree with you. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to thank our panelists for the excellent job they have done here. And thank you very much for joining us in this session.